So today, we're going to dive into Nathan Filer's incredible book, The Heartland. And this isn't your typical explainer on schizophrenia. No, this book actually takes that word, that diagnosis, and pulls it apart, forcing us to really question what we think we know about it. And this is the quote that really kicks things off. It's so powerful, right? It just sets the stage perfectly. We're not just talking about a clinical label here. We're talking about the immense, life-altering weight that this single word can have. I mean, just look at it. Let that word just sit there for a second. Filer actually suggests saying it out loud. Try it. How does it feel? What images pop into your head? What emotions does it stir up? Because, our own gut reaction to the word, well, that's a huge part of this story. All right, let's start with the diagnosis itself. Because in mental health care, language is, well, it's everything. The words we pick can literally build walls, or they can build bridges. Okay, first things first, let's just bust the biggest myth right out of the gate. The name itself comes from the Greek for split mind, which is super misleading. It has absolutely nothing to do with split personalities. That's a totally different thing. And what I find so fascinating here is how it shows that even the most basic labels are a kind of battleground. Think about it. Are you a patient? Which kind of implies you're sick and passive. Or are you a service user, defined only by how you interact with the system? Or maybe you're a survivor, a word that totally reclaims power. Each one tells a completely different story. Now, this is a quote that might, raise a few eyebrows. Because unlike a broken bone you can see on an x-ray, psychiatric diagnoses, well, they're decided by a committee. It's all based on observing what people do and say, not on some objective lab test. It's a consensus, not a discovery. Okay, so we've been talking about words and definitions, pretty abstract stuff. But what happens when this diagnosis lands in a real family's life? This is where we get to the devastating human cost of all this stigma. And here's where the story becomes just absolutely heartbreaking. This is Claire's son, Joe. His whole life was shaped by his diagnosis, and in the end, he lost that life. Her story really forces us to look past the clinical jargon and right into the heart of a family's pain. This is one of the most powerful things I've ever read. Claire's grief was so tangled up in shame that she actually found herself envying other mothers whose children died in ways society sees as tragic and, well, acceptable. Her son's death felt messy and shameful to the outside world, which pretty much left her to grieve all by herself. Right. So if the diagnosis itself is this kind of constructed thing, what about the causes? Where does something like psychosis even come from? Well, the book shows it's this incredibly complex web of things, and it goes way, way beyond just biology. And just look at this list. This is what's so wild. I mean, yeah, genetics is on there, of course, but look at everything else. Poverty, trauma, racism, even just where you live. In fact, the single biggest predictor of psychosis isn't genetics, it's poverty. Not because it directly causes it, but because it's what Filer calls the cause of causes. It just exposes you to all these other stressors. And if you need one stat to blow your mind, here it is. Researchers found that if you live in South London, you are 8 times more likely to develop psychosis than someone in Santiago, Spain. 8 times! That huge difference can't just be biology, right? It points directly to how powerful our environment really is. All right, let's pick up another thread here with another story. This one is about a woman named Bridget, and it really shines a light on one of the most powerful environmental factors there is, being isolated and let down by your community. So you've got Bridget. She's trying to do the right thing, right? She moves her 4 kids hoping for a fresh start, a return to her roots. But instead of finding a welcoming community, they were basically treated like outsiders. And that's where everything started to go wrong. And the way the book illustrates this is so effective. It's like you can almost hear the whispers in the town. They were just immediately marked as different. And instead of anyone stepping in to help, the community just kind of looked the other way. It's their own business. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This was a total failure of the community. Bridget was left completely alone, and she retreated deeper and deeper into her own reality, while her 4 kids just had to watch, with no one to help them. It's just a brutal example of what happens when we treat people like outsiders. Okay, for our final piece of the puzzle, we're going to tackle maybe the most confusing and misunderstood part of all this: delusions. But we're invited to see them not just as random madness, but as something with its own weird logic. Now get this. This is where it gets really, really interesting. The official definition of a delusion changed. It now says that a belief doesn't actually have to be false to be a delusion. So think about it. Let's say you're convinced your partner is cheating, but your proof is messages from the clouds. Okay, that sounds delusional. But what if they actually are cheating? Does that suddenly make you sane? Nope. The delusion isn't in what you believe, it's in how you came to believe it. So, what's going on in the brain here? Well, two brothers, Joel and Ian Gold, came up with this really cool idea called the suspicion system theory. Basically, we all have this little alarm system in our brains for social threats, right? It keeps us safe. But in psychosis, that system just goes haywire. It's screaming threat, threat, threat all the time, and our conscious mind can't turn it off. So what does the brain do? It makes up stories, delusions, to explain that constant feeling of danger. And this is the light bulb moment where it all clicks together. Why do things like trauma and racism and being an outsider increase the risk of psychosis? Because those experiences force you to be hypervigilant. They crank up that suspicion system and lock it into overdrive, which makes it way more likely to break down. So we're going to leave you with this final, really provocative question from the book. It just forces you to think about that very blurry line between a belief we call madness and a belief we call faith. It's a huge question that makes you wonder about the very foundation of how we define reality itself.